if I never become a world champion like Bosio, because I still gain so much from the process and learn countless lessons through debating. What matters is the narrative of the consistency. Consistency gave me a reason to stay long enough to discover what I was capable of. In a world without that narrative, I likely would have quit so much earlier because I would have assumed that not being exceptional from the start meant this was never for me. That is exactly the harm on their side. People do not just lose the title, they lose the chance to uncover their own potential at all because Gov is so addicted to the endpoints. But it ignores the narrative in itself and what it means to be, having that kind of progress, having that kind of growth in the first place. This is why we say, absent the narrative of consistency, the over glorification of birth lottery becomes even extreme because society is left with the impression that greatness is primarily something that you are born with rather than something that you can build. These are the harms that are fixed by the narrative in itself. Inside government, their sunk cost argument doesn't really work in this debate because consistency is not blind persistence. You do not glorify staying simply because you have already invested time. We glorify continued effort where there is still growth. Like for example, where you discover your own preferences in debating, something like that, rather than staying with that particular style from the beginning. But then they say that we get judged by what we produce and we cannot really control that. But in their world, you wouldn't even have the guts to start walking into a possible choice that might bring you the values that you have never discovered. Sure, I might not end up to be a world champion in debate, but I would have never improved my precision in ALAC method in law school if I didn't jump on this activity. In our world, you might not end up to be like Mariah Carey, but you will build a better growth of your voice to the point that you are now a good MC. Just take a look at all of the possibilities that you unlock within our side because you are not hampered by barriers from the start. So their argument is also non-comparative because the sunk cost exists in every vacuum in the world. In fact, it can be worse in their world, where society glorifies natural talent and prestige because people cling even harder to activities that signal status just to preserve the image that they were quote unquote one of the special few. That's why we don't diversify their identity. Problem, what if you are outcompeted in that specific characteristic? You gain no diversification, you gain no self-discovery, and you gain no self-fulfillment. At least in our world, the metric is development. So people have a clear standard for when to stay and when to pivot. First question then, where do we glorify achievements and career pathway better in both sides? We answer this by saying that the narrative of consistency democratizes excellence, and absent this narrative, arbitrary means are amplified towards the extreme because they are the only prevailing options to view upon. That's why, despite its flaws, we prove why the benefits that they provide outweighs their harms. In both sides of the house, people will still glorify figures like Messi, LeBron, Toby, and any other talented individual. But absent our narrative, what gets romanticized is only the extremes, the worst and the best characteristics. So our point is that if you remove the narrative of consistency, what if you are not born without any talent at all? So you wouldn't discover any of those options that are available for you because you're just an average individual. So those other premiums become even more aggressively glorified in their world because there is no longer a strong counterweight explaining why success is something built rather than simply possessed. Things like beauty, charisma, natural talent, genetics, social class, and all of the other premiums that make success look effortless and exclusive. That's why an average individual in golf wouldn't feel like they deserve to chase for these factors. But the thing is, the narrative of consistency also teaches us a much healthier lesson that awkwardness, slowness, and any forms of mediocrity at the beginning are normal parts of growth rather than evidence of permanent incapacity. So when we look at great debater, we don't just say that he's good and will never be like them, but perhaps we will see all of the hard work that they have spent with those matter files and lectures that made them who they are. Sure, there may be reasons to believe that we will never fully become someone like them, and this is me responding to the expectation case of golf. But the most important thing in this narrative is that it uniquely gives you the belief that I could do this too, rather than the fatalism that I cannot do all of this because, this is just who I am and I should know my place. This responds to the main case of golf because their entire case is just sunken cost policy. But we can just simply say that if you never end up like David Africa, for example, we still come away believing that improvement is possible individually and excellence is something built, not merely something assigned at birth because you have countermeasure. So you are not going to be judged at the end point if you value the narrative in itself because valuable growth is not just decided by success cases because even in failure, we learn. So improvement of these qualities and the capacity for you to think of experiments are much more prevalent in our side because you value the fact that density is needed in order for you to get motivated. This looks like you keep debating until you discover a style that actually feels like yours and not just something that you inherited from your earlier rounds. The goal is not to just keep repeating your old habit until they become sharper, but to keep evolving your skills that reflects towards your own instincts, strengths, and judgment. I'll take the POI.
Do you think continuous trials require a large amount of resources?
Even if it does, I mean, in both sides of the house, it doesn't matter what kind of resources you pull in order for you to improve. Because improvement in our side is valuable in itself. It doesn't matter if it's just a small win, a small step, because improvement sometimes requires refinement, but it also requires letting go of patterns that no longer serve you. So you do not stay trapped in your previous style. For example, if you debate, you keep debating until you grow into one that is truly your own. So it doesn't really matter if it's just a small step, because you value the fact that you are consistent with what you are doing, that you are growing. The better understanding of consistency is that you keep showing up for the process of growth, since that is the marker of the narrative. It is connected to the narrative at a broader social level, because narrative of consistency tells people what kind of effort deserves admiration. And this is what Joseph pointed out. It allowed us to amass data points. And this is why this debate winning. The reason why this narrative matters is that people do not just simply comply to all of the internal factors that they are born with. You do not just simply say that you are poor, so therefore you shouldn't, improve your own condition in life. You celebrate the success cases of people that actually did their best in order for them to have an upward trajectory and earn competence. This is why we celebrate the success cases of working students graduating in college, where we celebrate parents from low economic background where they uplifted themselves, and why they can still be respected for what they're building, even if they never become the single best person in the room, because we are not locked out by our own vision that premiums are the endpoint.